Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending this lightning round session on applied AI in library instruction. My name is Melina Titi, and this year I'm serving as the chair of the ACRL Instruction Section Virtual Engagement Committee. I want to thank the members of the committee for all of their work to make this lightning round possible, and also ACRL and Elois Sharp for facilitating the Zoom meeting. We are using the ACRL Zoom meeting room for this lightning round. Our 4 presenters will give their presentations, and we will have a combined Q&A session at the end. We ask that you type any questions in the chat and keep yourself muted throughout the presentation. Now, allow me to introduce our lightning round presenters who will be sharing their uses of AI in library instruction. In presentation order, we have Danielle Masursky, Education and Human Development Librarian at University of North Dakota, Dr. Elizabeth Jean Brumfeld, Distance Services Librarian, Prairie View A&M University, Laura Saunders, Professor and Associate Dean of Simmons University of Library and Information, Simmons School of Library and Information Science, and Sarah Hartman Caverly, Reference and Instruction Librarian at Penn State University Libraries. Each lightning round presentation will be approximately 10 minutes, and there will be a combined Q&A at the end following all 4 presentations. If you have a question for a specific presenter, please mention the name of the presenter or the topic when you ask your question in the chat. Each of the presenters has shared an abstract along with additional readings and resources, which you can access in our lightning round digest. I will link it in the chat momentarily. We're ready to get started, so without further ado, I will turn this event over to Danielle Masursky for her lightning talk.
All right, good. So I'm very excited to talk for the very few minutes that I have about the some of the AI assistants that are available to you and your patrons. This is a quickly developing field, and I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I am starting to incorporate some information for my students into the instruction that I'm giving them. I don't have time to give a lot of background, and I'm sort of assuming that people on this, in this presentation know at least something about what's going on in the AI world. So I thought what I would just mention, because this is probably the most relevant piece of information regarding AI assistance in the research realm, is that the training data, which I think is a sort of laughable term, but the information that's being used to create the the output, it differs significantly in these researcher tools than ChatGPT and Claude and other like AI assistants, for general use. So basically those tools are scraping the entire internet and creating their output from that. Whereas these researcher tools are using a curated data set. And that's one of the things that's, it's good, but it's also problematic because it's not all scholarly output in the, in the entire scholarly universe. There's publisher agreements and there's arrangements with, particular sources of scholarly data. So I think that's very important to know and to communicate to people when you're talking about this. So I just picked a couple of these tools to talk about. They're ones that I'm a little, that I've used a little bit, that I'm a little bit familiar with. And we'll see how far we get. I'm gonna start with 2 and see if I have enough time to talk about 3 of them. So the one that I like the best and that I've been using the most is Research Rabbit. And part of the reason that I like it is it's totally free. It was created by a consortium of academics. So they're not trying to make money. They're trying to, to incorporate, this sort of new level of AI search assistance in a way that's useful to researchers. So I did note that it's not completely transparent what the sources that are incorporated are, but this is a tool that I think is very useful for new scholars. And in the College of Education, I brought in to talk to graduate students a lot because they're often returning to school after a pretty big gap. And so they're pretty uncomfortable with the research process. They often didn't do a lot of, research papers in their undergrad, and now, maybe some time, sometimes a significant amount of time has gone by, and they're quite uncomfortable with the technology that they're expected to use. And so I like Research Rabbit because I think it's user friendly. I think it has a little bit of wow factor. And I think that it's a really great tool for people who are starting out in their field. So what happens is I've already logged into this. So of course you have to set up your account. I don't have time to like run through that sort of thing, but I've created a couple of collections, based on the kinds of demonstrations that I've been giving. So you can see, we did a thing about library anxiety, sort of an internal, professional development program. And so I found some articles, just using this because it's a great tool. And then this was a topic, land reclamation in tribal climate change activism. So this is what happens when you can add a paper, and you can put the title of the paper. You can also just type keywords, but I went and got a DOI to show how this works. So I'm going to add a paper, and it immediately pulls it in. And then you can see it gives me all these options over here. And this is the one that I think is really delightful. Is it like you saw instantaneously, it goes out and collects all the papers that it thinks is related to this. And this is first of all, I think a visual is really helpful anyway. But also, I think that a lot of times when I talk to graduate students, and this is true with undergraduates as well, although I don't know that I would direct them to this, but they're trying to narrow down their search way too soon. Like they're trying to make their search too narrow. And that's why I really love this tool, because it shows how their topic is related to other areas and other researchers. So I think it's useful as an instruction tool because it helps me explain that they should be looking at adjacent research areas. And then all of these little dots are connected to papers and so on. So I just think it's a very powerful way to help a new researcher get into the right mindset of exploring this task. Okay. So, I would really encourage you to take a look at this. Like I said, it's free. It's very interesting. I think it's very valuable. So, site is something that our library's been looking into, sort of, adopting as our sort of AI assistant of choice. And it has some, I think it's a very powerful tool. Again, the sourcing is not totally clear. And it has, like many of these tools that have a price, you can do like a search or a couple of searches initially, and then there's a fee. So this one is kind of pricey. So I'm going to show you Elicit next, and we'll come back to that if we have time. I don't think we will. Elicit, I have a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for Elicit because it was the first AI assistant that I was ever introduced to by a colleague. And I think it's very user friendly. It's cheaper if somebody would like to subscribe to it. So I usually direct people to this one first because they can explore. You can do a couple of searches without paying, and then if they decide they like it, they can subscribe for I think a more kind of a more reasonable price point. So here's you can see it's very simple. It's got a couple of specific functions that it does. And you can find papers, and you can see they have this little coin. So this is what it's going to cost me later, to do a search. So I'm doing land reclamation is my sort of example. And so now it's going to go find some papers for me. It's going to summarize them. You can do a per paper summary. You can do a summary of multiple papers. I actually find this a little uncomfortable because I feel like this is the intellectual work that students should be doing. But people are going to be using these tools. So I think we sort of are required to at least have a working knowledge of what they're doing and what they offer, and understand what shortcuts people may be taking, and to help them navigate that. I mean, those of us who are old enough to remember when Wikipedia came along and we were all very frustrated with what we thought was a very inappropriate way to access information, but we've wrapped our arms around it and we've figured out how to explain the value to people and what is good at and what is not good at. So I have confidence in us that we will be able to communicate that in the future to our patrons and our the people that we feel so passionately about, making sure they know how to engage in this process and demonstrate their literacy. So let me just mention a couple of things. I think I'm not getting the time. I'm supposed to be getting little time pop-ups and I'm not getting them. So, but I don't want to go over them. So this is what I think is very important for information professionals to understand whether they're interested in AI assistance or not. Like, my colleagues here at the University of North Dakota, some of them are really excited and interested in AI, assistance, and some of them are like, la 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 la. They really have enough other things to worry about. But I think it's so important for us to understand the limitations and concerns that people have about this kind of assistance. Obviously, the source data is very important, and it comes often from specific publisher agreements. And so maybe literature that's a little bit outside the mainstream, marginalized voices, alternative perspectives are not going to be represented. And people need to understand that what they're seeing is a very selective set of information. And this is true in a library database as well. This is not new. This isn't a new situation. But I think it's very important for us to understand this is not all knowledge. And if someone wants to use a tool like this, they should take responsibility for making sure that they're covering their topic, outside of whatever's included in this AI assistant that they've chosen. The second part is particularly concerning, that there's some problem with transparency, and hopefully this will be addressed as these tools get more sophisticated and there's some pushback on them, kind of keeping their information proprietary. So, but that's something else for us to know and communicate to our patrons, is that we don't necessarily always know exactly where this information is being pulled from, and that's something to be aware of. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's important for scholars, future scholars, to understand that judging and choosing information is part of, a very important part of this process. So they don't want to outsource everything to an assistant, and they need to make choices about what's going to help them develop, their skills, and what is an appropriate thing to outsource to an assistant that will help them be more efficient. So again, I feel like this is a conversation we have to have with people all the time anyway in these contexts. But I think these assistants, they pose it's very easy to just go and get the papers that the assistant gave us and take the summary that it gave us and move on. And I think we need to be a little more critical and thoughtful, during that process, and use the tool for what it's good for, but not cede your own judgment and your own process to that. So that's my final slide. Is we know our patrons are going to be using these, so we need to figure out how to communicate effectively about what the value and the limitations are. So I think that's enough. So I use the slides go, and you're supposed to let the your audience know.
Okay, so I am Elizabeth Jean Brumfield, and I am going to second. Okay, so we do at the John B. Coleman Library what we call Tech Tuesday during the fall and spring term. And we use these 1-hour sessions on Zoom to look at practical and emerging technologies. So for 3 weeks, we decided to look at artificial intelligence, and then we added art. So we started with introduction, getting people introduced into what is AI, how to use AI, some definitions of the difference between generative AI as opposed to other AI. We had sessions on how to use the tools to create art like Image Creator, Night Cafe, Magic Media, ChatGPT, the fourth version, which also allows you to create video. And we included discussions on ethical and legal considerations. So this presentation is going to cover a little bit of some of the things that we discussed, but again, this is a lightning round, so it's not going to be the discussions that we actually did in 3 weeks. We ended, or after the few weeks, with a special project, and this was a campus-wide use of AI, where we, for Black History Month, we used the ASALA theme for the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. Their theme was African Americans and Art. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to experiment with AI. And so we had instruction, then we had an exhibit where people would actually display their images. And then we had a contest so that the images that were selected for as so-called winners would have their image made into a tote bag. So the first thing, our introduction, we asked some of the participants why would create AI images. So some of the thoughts were, it was just a way to experiment technology. AI is a big thing right now, and just learning how to use the technology is just a reason to experiment. To another reason, convert difficult concepts into visual representations. And artists do this all the time, but if you are, say, not artistic, but you mentally have a thought that you want to convey, AI can do this for you. Also, another reason, a way to get quality artwork for personal use. And there was one of the students, he just wanted to put something on his wall. And so this is a way to use AI. Make unique images, even things not visualized in reality. So you could do futuristic images. You can create, there's an image I saw of penguins in Walmart or something like that. I forget what it was. But anyway, yeah. So another reason to experiment with the AI technology. Our goal was to just encourage greater appreciation of art and technology, and to provide instructions on how to utilize your creative imagination. So some of the ethical considerations when we discussed this in our sessions, originality and authenticity. This is a major concern because the computer is actually creating the image, but the person who is making the prompts is using their mind to tell the computer what to do. And it's not always, when you're doing images to get what you want, sometimes it takes hours. It takes several prompts. It takes over and over. And it makes the person really have to think of what they want and have an idea of how to communicate that in a prompt to tell the computer to create the image. So this is, a question of what is original. Where does originality start and stop when you're doing AI for art? Another concern, some programs can perpetuate stereotypes and biases. And when I was demonstrating in one of the sessions, I put in librarians, and all of the images had glasses. And even when I said no glasses, the images still had glasses. It was a bias or a stereotype that the algorithm was put in that made librarians all wear glasses. So algorithms are only as unbiased as the data that they are trained on. So that's a ethical consideration. Then manipulation and the ability to deceive users. There are some programs where you can put the face of somebody else on another person's body and, you know, deceive a person who may look at the picture. And there's other things that have been done that are unethical, and they deceive the person who is viewing it. So you have to think about that. And then there's the digital divide. Most of the default is English, and a lot of them require payment. Sometimes they will have a trial and then you pay later. But if you have neither, if you have or not English and you don't have money, then you don't have access to those tools. And when we were demonstrating and showing people how to use AI, we tried to make sure that we had the ones that were free. And even when we started out, like ChatGPT, the ChatGPT 4 version was not, it started off free, but it's a trial, and then we had to pay. So that is a consideration. And then there's some technology issues, and one is what they call hallucinate, and that what that means is that sometimes the algorithm will create something that is fake, and it does it pretty much on its own. That's called emergent property. That there's no rhyme or reason of why that image is created. It's just, it's there. I had I asked the computer to do a image of the building that I work in, and it had the address and everything and the prompt, and it was something totally different. There's no rhyme or reason. It just creates that. And this is it does it in print. If you do use some of them, and it will have a citation of an article that doesn't exist. And this is what it's called, hallucinate. One of the main things with the AI and art is the consideration, will AI art take jobs from human artists? And that it's hard to tell. You don't know. That's something I think in the future we will have to deal with. So far, there are artists feel like it is very possible. So some of the legal considerations that we talked about in our sessions, copyright infringement. Some of the programs are trained on collections without the consent or knowledge of the owners. And so there were some prompts that you could use, and you can ask for the style. You want an image in the style of an artist. And that they have been removed from some of the programs because the artists were filing lawsuits because they're saying that this is the computer is being trained, the program is being trained on the artists without their consent. Another legal consideration that has been shown up in court cases is the transformative nature of the use of the image. What is the image used for what it was supposed to be and intended for, and is it going to be used for something else later? And this is things that we actually had to deal with when we were doing this project, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a few minutes. Then there's the harm factor. As I mentioned, the artist, can the artist lose their income if someone is reproducing something that is so similar and is done with AI that they no longer need the artist? And then there is the human factor. In order for the copyright protection only goes to humans. And so if a computer is the original owner of the image, then there is no copyright protection. So this is the,
Hey, Elizabeth, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you're seeing the messages, but you're at time now.
but I'm what?
That the time is finished now.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
gosh.
Thank
Can I
you.
do 1 minute just, no,
Well, we really need to move on.
okay, all right,
Thank you.
well, let me just show the pictures. All right, this is the tape, the things. All right, sorry. I didn't see the time.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Laura Saunders from Simmons University, and I'm actually going to be talking more about how I used AI to teach emerging librarians. So I teach courses for students in the LIS degree program at Simmons. And so I'm just going to be talking a little bit about how I've been thinking about teaching students and how I've been using AI to some extent to integrate it into my classes. So the first thing I just wanted to say, well, two things I wanted to say. First of all, that I used the Adobe AI to create the ostrich images for these slides. I was a little torn about doing that because of some of the ethical reasons that Elizabeth just brought up, but I thought that it would help to kind of just give you a sense of where I am. And as I say, in some ways, I consider myself a bit of a Luddite at heart in the sense that I am not the most techie of people. I'm not the type of person who necessarily jumps immediately onto different tech trends. And so when AI really exploded onto the scene over the last year and a half or so, I did not feel ready to deal with this. And the reason I went with these ostrich images was because I did sort of feel like a person with my head in the sand. Because initially, when our Center for Faculty Excellence, for instance, started reaching out with guidance and having discussions about how do we know how our students are using AI and what should our policies be, if I'm being perfectly honest, I sort of wanted to not have to have those conversations and to try and maybe ignore them to some extent. And the other thing that was challenging is that I felt like we weren't really getting a lot of guidance. There was a lot of discussion, but not necessarily a lot of guidance about how do you know what's happening, how can you keep it on top of these things, and so on. But at a certain point, so I would say, I kind of had to go through this journey of initially wanting to just avoid the situation because I found it stressful and kind of feeling overwhelmed and unsure, to a point where I felt like I was ready to explore. And maybe it was really even whether or not I was ready to explore, knowing that this was really something that I had to do. To get back to Danielle's point, this is something that we know people are using, our patrons, our students, whoever we're working with. And so we really need to know what's happening and how to use it well. So my probably very first use of ChatGPT, beyond just kind of trying to think up questions of on my own, was that we had a visiting scholar coming to campus, and I was coordinating the visit, and I was told that I needed to write up a contract for this person. And I was feeling a little bit unsure about, well, what do I need to put into this contract? And my supervisor said, well, just ask ChatGPT to write it for you. And I did. And, I asked ChatGPT to write me a draft of this contract, which I then, I tweaked and I sent to our general counsel. And our general counsel was like, yeah, this is great. You can use this. And that was when I kind of started to feel like, okay, this is something that not only am I capable of doing, but again, I really kind of have to do. So I started out by trying to think about how could I use this in my classroom? What could I do with to integrate AI into the classroom before really engaging the students with it? So, one of the things that I love to do in my classes is to use case studies or scenarios, around ethical situations or, example reference transactions and things like that. And typically I will spend hours and hours trying to think of new reference scenarios every semester or come up with believable case studies. And so one of the things that I found AI to be helpful with is just kind of generating some ideas for me. What might be a good example of an ethical situation in an academic library or things like that. Or likewise helping me to think up new discussion questions that again might just kind of come at it from a slightly different angle than what I was coming from. I do teach a course on reference and reference services. And so I tried having ChatGPT write reference transcripts for me. This, I would say, was one of the less successful forays. The I think part of the problem was it just came up with very straightforward examples. And although I kept trying to prompt it to come up with something a little bit more complex, something where maybe the reference librarian wasn't absolutely getting a right answer every single time and completely and fully answering the patron's question every single time, um, I couldn't get it to come up with anything that I thought was really going to be useful in my classes. To Elizabeth's point, potentially I wasn't giving it the right prompts, and maybe if I had spent a little bit more time with it, we would have gotten somewhere, but I wasn't really getting what I needed. What was useful was that I had it answer reference questions for me. So I would just pose a reference question and have it answer me. And then I was actually able to use those answers with my questions as the reference transaction, where ChatGPT, for instance, was the reference librarian. And then we were analyzing those transcripts in my classes alongside transcripts from real reference librarians. And I didn't initially tell the students which were which, and I kind of let them look at the ways in which ChatGPT compared to a human librarian's answer in terms of both the thoroughness and the accuracy of the answers, as well as those elements around kind of conversation, clarifying questions, and things like that. But this was my own journey of kind of getting to know AI and thinking about how I could work it into the classroom as sort of, as I put in my initial slide, AI is my TA, like kind of trying to help me do something more with my teaching. But the next step was really thinking about how do I engage my students with AI? How do I get them to start using this? And this is where I was really feeling torn for a number of reasons. First is I started by just kind of asking my students questions about what was their experience with AI and things like that. And what I found is that they were very concerned, and that most of them were not using AI yet, and they were a little bit afraid to try it for all of and a lot of their concerns were really around the ethical concerns that Elizabeth brought up, including things like how their data was going to be used and what the privacy issues might be and things like that. And so then I started feeling like, well, these are really important questions. And I think this is part of how I integrate AI into the classes is for us to talk about what are the ethical issues? What are some of the things that you're concerned about? And how might we address some of those things? And then starting to introduce materials into the class without requiring the students to access the AI platforms themselves. So, in other words, I didn't want to require them to register for an account, for instance, and share their information and ask questions, even if they were made up questions. Because this is a third party platform, and I knew my students, I was getting the sense that they weren't comfortable with it. So, I started by just integrating the AI examples into the class, running the prompts myself and sharing those with the students, and then later giving the students access, giving them options to access the AI. So letting them know that they could think about, that they could ask the AI questions, um, or that they could use AI for some of their assignments, reflection assignments, and things like that. And reflect on the information they were getting from the AI, but this was an option. They didn't absolutely have to do it. Um, Sorry. So just getting, so like I said, the ethical concerns for me are really about can I or should I require students to use third party softwares like this, knowing that they have concerns of their own and thinking about all of those ethical issues that have already been brought up, and I'm not going to repeat right now in the interest of time, but really trying to think about acknowledging that I really think my students do actually have to know about this. And more than just know about it, I think eventually they have to learn how to use it, because again, they're going to be working with people who are using these tools, but trying to find the balance between knowing that they need to know this and yet not forcing it on them in a way that makes them uncomfortable. So really just talking to my students about the fact that our patrons are going to be using this, as Danielle said. You're not going to get around it. And so you really do have to understand, what are your students, your patrons getting out of this? And understanding that it is going to impact our workflows, just like Google did, just like Wikipedia did. In some way or another, this is going to change the way that we do our work. And potentially, I think it could enhance some of our services in some ways. In the same way that we were a little cautious and skeptical about Google and Wikipedia, I think we could, but then we learned how to use those in pretty efficient ways. I think we could do the same here, but we have to be cautious and think about those ethical issues. So for myself, I'm going to continue to explore this. And for my students, I think it's going to be continuing to bring them into the conversation and finding ways to introduce them to us. And I think the most important thing is just recognizing that this is not going to replace us, but it is going to change how we work. Thank you.
All right, everyone, good afternoon. You should hopefully be seeing my screen. We're going to talk about generative AI as an agent to think ethically with in the context of entrepreneurship and innovation education. So we're going to explore 3 learning activities that I created for library instruction in entrepreneurship and innovation courses, and then I'll share some of the theoretical framing that informed my learning design. When I teach with generative AI, I try to craft learning experiences that achieve 3 goals: AI literacy, the ability to contextualize, evaluate, and interpret generative AI output; AI fluency, the ability to effectively prompt generative AI to reliably produce the expected output; and AI ethics, the use of generative AI that aligns with other social values like human dignity, privacy, and respect for intellectual property, as we've been discussing. I want my students to be able to ethically use AI as an agent to think with and to augment their intellect and creativity, not to replace it. I'll highlight how each of these goals shows up in the 3 learning activities we're exploring today. I run this pitch with AI Assist activity with first-year students and in co-curricular augmented innovation workshop programming for Global Entrepreneurship Week and Penn State Startup Week. First, students work in small teams to develop a human-created product or service innovation based on 3 random terms from Venture Lab's online pitch cards. They publish their product and slogan on a Padlet online board, pitch their product, and the class votes for the best pitch. Next, students prompt generative AI using the same 3 terms to develop a product or service, slogan, and 20-second pitch. They publish the output to the Padlet, and the class votes on the best AI-generated pitch. Prompting exercises are great for developing AI fluency. I knew I was onto something when a student exclaimed, "That's so unethical," after seeing the AI product concept and pitch for the same concept they'd worked on. You can see their team's human-created concept and the AI-generated counterpart on this slide. The students created a, quote, height adjustable fan that creates white noise for sleep with the slogan, quote, the white noise for all heights. And to be honest, I was actually pretty impressed with this concept and pitch. AI generated the Whisper Breeze mini fan with the slogan, short on space, big on comfort, Whisper Breeze, where you listen to coolness. Students were immediately attuned to the potential for automation and economic dislocation with the introduction of generative AI into product development, sales, and marketing, building their AI literacy skills and AI ethics disposition. Think, Pair, Ask AI, Share can work with students at any level. This example of prompt design for market research is based on versions I developed for upper-level digital and destination marketing courses. I also use Think, Pair, Ask AI, Share for product concept evaluation in that augmented innovation workshop. Students are provided a market research question relevant to their assignment, such as what are the demographic, economic, and cultural characteristics of Reading, Pennsylvania, the city adjacent to our campus. They are directed to first brainstorm some prompts on their own, and then work with a partner to select and refine 1 to 2 prompts to input into generative AI. Students are provided links to generative AI platforms, including 2 that do not require an account to log in, to Laura's point, Perplexity and the AI Playground. Students are directed to prompt AI and critically evaluate the output, practicing their AI literacy skills. And we discuss their findings and experiences as a class. I found that students' prior knowledge and experience with generative AI varies widely, so I developed this prompt design framework to guide them in writing effective prompts. I encourage them to consider assigning the AI a persona, specifying the output requirements, prescribing an organization for the output, consider requesting different output media, explaining the rhetorical purpose and intended audience of the output, and specifying the desired tone. Working in pairs or small teams with the prompt design framework as part of the Think, Pair, Ask AI, Share activity builds students' AI fluency. Market research output from generative AI invariably leads to rich discussions about AI bias and alignment. For example, students encountered a generative AI platform that demurred when prompted to report on the Black population of Reading, Pennsylvania, but did ultimately provide a racial and ethnic breakdown of the total population of the city, which included statistics on the Black and African American population. Another AI platform preceded its output on demographics by chastising students not to generalize from or stereotype based on the output or otherwise use it in a discriminatory manner. To explore these concepts further, I have students visit Rest of World's image galleries created with Midjourney. We discuss students' observations about AI bias, stereotyping, and alignment, and their implications for the ethical use of generative AI. In the Augmented Innovation Workshop, I incorporate a product concept evaluation activity using Debano's 6 Thinking Hats and generative AI. Debano's 6 Thinking Hats is a structured evaluation technique that I promote to entrepreneurs as a way to test their product or service concept for free, even prior to prototyping. Each of the 6 hats adopts a specified disposition with respect to evaluation. The white hat summarizes facts about the concept, while the red hat responds emotionally to it. The yellow hat identifies positive aspects of the concept, while the black hat points to potential problems and liabilities. The green hat identifies areas of growth and connection to extend the concept, while the blue hat is the logistician or control persona that thinks strategically about how to implement the concept. This example depicts Debano's 6 Thinking Hats evaluating the concept of a green driveway. In the workshop, students are directed to prompt generative AI to apply Debano's 6 Thinking Hats to evaluate their product or service innovation. Students participate in a Think, Pair, Ask AI, Share activity to craft their prompts and discuss the output. I developed this final activity, Marketing Matchup, Humans versus AI, for an upper-level hospitality management course on destination marketing. In this activity, student teams first write a tweet-length social media post to market their destination. Then they use a generative AI platform to generate a social media post for the same destination. Teams use a digital coin toss to determine whether their human post is recorded in the heads or tails column, and their AI post gets recorded in the other column. Then we vote as a class to see if we can determine which posts were written by people and which were written by AI. This example includes an AI-generated post to market the Brandywine Valley of Chester County, Pennsylvania, which reads, "Discover the enchanting beauty of Brandywine Valley. Immerse yourself in lush gardens, historic mansions, and vibrant cultural attractions. Indulge in world-class art galleries, wineries, and charming boutiques. Experience thrilling outdoor adventures like kayaking or hiking along scenic trails. Uncover a rich history that will captivate your senses. Brandywine Valley awaits you." And the human-authored counterpart, Brandywine Valley is well known as an upper-class region of Pennsylvania. Located in Chester County, this area features many sporting events, concerts, and festivals every year. They are also known for many great universities and colleges. An example would be Westchester University. Overall, this is a great area that offers a great place to live. So this activity leads to conversations about voice, tone, authenticity, and consumers' algorithmic aversion to some AI-generated content. Students have an opportunity to practice AI fluency and develop knowledge of AI ethics. I'll close by sharing some sources I turn to theoretically ground my use of generative AI in entrepreneurship and innovation instruction. For prompt design, I always highlight an undergraduate student perspective that was published in the Happy Valley Industry Newsletter from State College. That's the Gupta citation there, Gupta 2024. I started out using Leo Lowe's CLEAR framework, but I ultimately found that students need something a bit more practical and directed, which is why I developed the prompt design framework. In addition to developing students' AI literacy and fluency, I want them to develop AI ethics. Teaching with generative AI naturally lends itself to discussions about bias, hallucination, or fabrication, and other generative AI harms, and also about alignment and censorship. We discuss intellectual property considerations, not only regarding the use of copyrighted materials to train large language models, but also risk areas that students need to be aware of, like the potential for public disclosure of patentable ideas or other privileged information in prompts. I'm also interested in discussions around data colonialism and data sovereignty and green AI. Finally, there's a growing literature discussing the use of generative AI in entrepreneurship, innovation, and marketing, including to brainstorm product and service innovations, to draft pitches, conduct preliminary market research, and craft marketing copy, which inspired my learning activities. I just want to give a shout out to the author Christian Clark in the Koenig and Clark 2023 citation, who's another undergraduate researcher from Penn State Berks, and who introduced me to the idea of AI as an agent to think with. So thanks so much for being here today, and please feel free to reach out to me if you're curious about any of these applications of AI in library instruction.
All right, so I want to thank all of our presenters. My name is Meredith, and I'm here to moderate our open question and answer. If you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. I just ask that you, if it's directed to a specific presenter, please include their name at the beginning of your question, and I will apologize in advance if I mispronounce anyone's name. So I will kick us off while we wait for questions to come in. Laura, I was curious, so with your students, are they predominantly academic librarians, or are they looking to go into public libraries? And do you see a difference between their reactions to AI depending on that?
That is a great question. So the course that I have mostly been talking about AI in is the reference course that I was referring to is actually a required course for all of our students, and we have a huge number of archives concentrators in our program. So actually, I would say the largest number of students in my course in that course right now is archives concentrators, but then also more public librarians than academic librarians. So it's an interesting mix, and I'm not sure if that career orientation is potentially coloring some of their thoughts and reactions on this.
Great, thank you. And it looks like we've got a question for Elizabeth from Amy Schielke. Elizabeth, have you found an image generating AI tool that does work with languages other than English?
Yeah, I was just putting it in the chat. ChatGPT 4 does use other languages. You can change the language, and I think Bing Image Creator does as well. You can change the language from the default.
And then Elizabeth, while you were giving your presentation, a comment came through and I wanted to give you space to respond to it. Caroline Coward had said, creating an AI image based on someone else's intellectual property is often considered unethical, but not illegal. Laws are being updated weekly. Was there anything you wanted to respond to that with?
Yes, that's correct. And one of the things that I mentioned, the human factor, that's probably the part. It is unethical, but she's correct. It is not illegal. And when we did our contest, all of the images that the people created, we used all of their images because they were not copyright. And we told them that they're not copyright protected, even though you're doing it. And we made them into the tote bags and put the library logo on it. So that was a way of showing that this is something that can be done by other people as well. So that's yeah, correct.
Thank you. And then we've got a question for all of our presenters from Elizabeth White, who asks, if you're a Microsoft 365 campus and have access to Enterprise Copilot, are you marketing it to your users? I'm going to take that as a no. Um, and I saw, Elizabeth, you'd put into when Danielle was giving her
Yeah.
presentation, for people who've used Power Notes as well, how does Research Rabbit compare? Danielle, I don't know if you've got experience with that tool.
I haven't, so I'll have to look into it. There's so many. I mean, you know, no one's got time. Who's got time to get familiar with everything out there? It's exhausting.
So I'll also ask all of our presenters, what was the most difficult part of putting these services or sessions together? Did you receive pushback from either administrators or faculty or other students you've been working with?
I think the biggest challenge is 10 minutes is very short to convey something of substance and give it appropriate context. So you know, lightning is it's a good challenge. It's a good challenge to learn how to communicate something meaningful in a very brief moment. But
I have a comment. I think that one of the hardest things was, and I think one of the other presenters talked about it, that people were concerned about the ethical issues. They were afraid that, you know, am I doing something that will get me in trouble?
Do any of you have recommendations for us about how we can start using AI in instruction or our own practice?
you have to play around with it a little bit. You have to get comfortable with, you know, pick a tool and get a little bit comfortable and see where you think it might fit into your work.
Some of it has to do too with what you're teaching. So for instance, if you are, you know, like the example Sarah gave for marketing and communications kinds of things were so cool. But you know, I think some of that might not work if you were, you know, liaising to, I don't know, like chemistry class or something like that. So I think it probably depends on who you're trying to support and who you're trying to teach. Um, like I said, for myself, where I'm teaching librarians, I think it's striking the balance between getting them to learn about the tool and the ethics and things like that, and also thinking about how could this potentially enhance some of the work that they do.
And we've got a question coming in from Joy Hansen that says, I think references, Laura, your work with putting together a contract, but probably can go out to all of our presenters. With an example such as using AI to write a contract or grant or insert, even if we edit the output heavily, we would still need to cite that AI was involved, correct? How do presenters feel about citing AI in this professional capacity?
So I think this is another area where we're not necessarily getting a lot of guidance. And so, you know, I think there's a lot of concern about students using this, you know, as for the creating the intellectual property for their papers and things like that. And you know, one of the presenters kind of pointed to that, like some of this is the intellectual work that the students should be doing for themselves. But I'm on the board for the Journal for Information Literacy, and we have been talking for almost a year now about what our policy should be around AI for people who are publishing in the journal. And it's not, it's still not entirely clear. I mean, the idea is we're telling authors your work has to be your own, but there's no guidance about how to cite AI and how much, what's the difference between using it to generate ideas versus using it to actually write something, like where is the line? So I guess I don't have a really great answer to that question, and I don't know if any of the other presenters do.
And then I want to point out too, Caroline was kind enough to put in a number of scholars that are working on AI, and most are on LinkedIn. So I'll grab those and we can include those in our notes. And I see, Sarah, that you responded to Kimberly's question already, but I want to give you space if there's anything else you want to open up on that. Kimberly had asked, I'm familiar with your work on privacy literacy. Have you found intersections between that area and instruction involving generative AI use?
So the short answer is yes. Some of the concepts that I cover in that workshop are this issue of intellectual property for sure, but we also take a deeper dive into data sovereignty and data colonialism. So as a little bit of a preview, I do, to Laura's point and one of the questioner's points, cite that I use Perplexity to develop some materials for the workshop. I have a neural network simulation that students go through, and I used Perplexity to translate a familiar nursery rhyme into an indigenous language and its indigenous script, Tamazight from Morocco. So students essentially have the experience of being a neural network, identifying patterns in the source text, and then being able to complete the pattern of the source text, having never really encountered the language before. And we use that as a jumping off point to talk about not just data colonialism and data sovereignty, but also how do these systems work? They're not interpreting meaning, they're not thinking, they're really pattern detection and completion systems, right? And some of the other concepts that we discuss in that workshop also involve bias and the corrective mechanisms that are in place to adjust for that bias, including fine-tuning and alignment techniques, reinforcement learning with human feedback, all of those techniques, and how they can sometimes cross the line into censorship and pose some intellectual freedom challenges as well. So please definitely take a look at that along with all of our other privacy workshop materials. It's all, open licensed, available to adapt and reuse. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or suggestions or feedback on that. Thanks for the question though.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm looking at our time and we are coming right up to 3 o'clock. So I'm going to turn us back over to Melina.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Meredith. So that concludes today's lightning round. We may not have addressed every question, or if other questions arise, you can reach out to our presenters via email if you wish. If our presenters wouldn't mind, maybe you could drop your email in the chat so people could copy it down if they wanted to continue a discussion. There's also a link to the lightning round digest. Let me drop that link again in just a moment.
Maybe we could add our emails to the digest.
Sure. If you don't mind that, I could ask Lois to include that information when she sends to the digest. Yes, if you don't mind, I would do that. I'm sorry, let me open the chat one more time to drop the digest link. So here's the digest link once more. I have asked Lois to include it with the recording as well, so she will include that. So where was I here? So thank you again to all of our presenters, Danielle Masursky, Dr. Elizabeth Jean Brumfeld, Laura Saunders, and Sarah Hartman-Caverly for a great session and for sharing their uses of AI in library instruction. Thanks also to Elois Sharp and everyone at ACRL who helped organize this event. And thank you to the Virtual Engagement Committee members for making this session possible. Thanks to Meredith Knopf for moderating the chat and for everybody else for their work behind the scenes. And thank you to all of you attendees for coming. Thank you for joining the session today and for your questions for our presenters. So we will be sending out a recording for everyone who registered, as well as for people who signed up because this event filled up. So the link will be made available when it's available on the ACRL YouTube. So thank you all again and have a great week. Thank you for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank you.